Welcome to this Photoshop tutorial on creating panoramics. So in this tutorial today we're going to create a panoramic from these 4 images. So as you notice, it's not like your standard panoramic that is a horizontal line of consecutive images, but this is rather 2 images that will be attached horizontally and then 2 below that which will be attached vertically. So it is sometimes useful to be able to do this in Photoshop in order to create larger sized images or create images that have a bigger pixel count. It is also recommended that when you're photographing these images that you have about a 25% overlap in the images. So you see here that I've got a good bit of overlap, a bit of detail that's just the same in both. This will assist Photoshop in making the attachment. It is also recommended that you try to avoid as much as possible people moving in it, and you can see here there are different people in it, people moving, so that may or may not cause a problem once we attach the files together using the panoramic tool, but let's see what happens. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to close these 4 images and then add them straight into the PhotoStitch program in Photoshop. This will just save memory rather than just having them open. So I'm just going to go close all, and then I'm going to go to File, Automate, and PhotoMerge. I'm going to leave it on auto. I'm going to browse to my files, which are here. Select all 4 by clicking, holding the left mouse button and selecting over them. So you can see here there are a number of options at the bottom. So first of all, blend images together. So that will just make sure that if the images are slightly darker or brighter than each other, they will get blended together. Vignette removal can be useful for removing vignettes from your image if the corners are dark, which darker than the center of the image, which normally they are, because most lenses will have a certain amount of vignetting. Geometric distortion, then if you're photographing with a wide angle lens, you can get distortions in your images. So this can be set to correct those. And then also content aware fill transparency areas, which is relatively new to this tool. We'll do a content aware fill, which you can try to check. So for this, we'll try and check it and see how that turns out. So I'm going to click on OK, and then I'm going to let Photoshop process the files and attach them. Now, depending on the specs of your PC, you may or may not get good the type of results you may get may vary in terms of how long it might take to process the images. So I'm working with a fairly high spec PC, and the image sizes are relatively large. If you're working with smaller size images, it may also go quicker. So this is the final result, and you can see here the selected area is the areas of the actual image, and then the areas outside the selection are the content aware fill areas, which it's done a relatively good job. You can see we've got some other kind of distortion issues going on here, which is fine. So with this image now we can do some cropping and straightening. So first of all, I'm just going to deselect by pressing Ctrl D, and then we're going to straighten the horizon a little bit and then do some lens corrections. It's best that we go ahead and do that all in the lens correction tool. So I'm just going to go ahead. I've got this already saved as a PSD file with the layers in it. So I'm just going to go ahead and flatten it and then convert it to smart filters so it's easily editable with our lens correction changes. So I go to filter and lens correction, and we need to go to the custom tab, and we can do most of our changes from here. So straightening the horizon, etc. So the angle can be slightly straightened, and this is useful to enable the grid, which you see you have down below here. And you can also change the size of the grid, make the lines bigger or smaller as you need. Okay, so here we had, well, we're kind of dealing with a crooked horizon, but we're also dealing with the angle that it was shot at, because it was shot at slightly off angle. So we need to change the horizontal and the vertical perspective. So if I change the horizontal perspective, this will help straighten it up a little bit, and then the vertical perspective as well. So we can leave a small amount of the angle at it because it was photographed at an angle anyway. And I'm going to reduce the scale just so more of it kind of fits in the photograph. And then we're going to be doing some cropping here afterwards. So a little bit more vertical perspective. One thing you always have to be careful with vertical perspective is not to overdo it, because the building with this type of distortion, the building looks like it's falling backwards. But if you overdo it and straighten the angles too much, it'll start looking like the building is bigger at the top. So it's important not to overdo that. But I think we're okay now at about 53%. Everything looks straight, and we just have to fix a little bit of distortion that was caused by maybe the lens or the photo stitch. So that looks okay. And then I'm going to click on OK to accept those changes. So now we have our final image here, which I'm just going to crop. The useful thing about smart filters then is you can see here, if I double click on the lens correction tool and go back to custom, all our settings are saved here. So I don't have to go back in and reapply them. And that makes the filter, it makes it a non-destructive adjustment. So next I'm just going to go in and crop this. So at the moment I have the crop settings set to certain proportions with these pixels. I'm going to clear that out. Accept those changes, and that's it. So this part here, we're just going to do a little cloning to fill it in. So if I'm click on a new blank layer and I go to my clone stamp, Alt, click the sample, and then just start painting in. Alt, click again, and that's filled in nicely. Just make sure when you're doing that you have a sample all layers checked. I always clone on a new layer because it's just safer to do that in case you make a mistake. It's easily corrected, or if you want to mask something out in the end. So you can see that looks pretty good there. Okay, so that's the final image, and I hope that you found this tutorial useful. Thank you for watching.